My camera's probably off still, right?
All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. And tonight we're hosting a debate, and I am 100% excited about this. So, the topic for tonight is atheism or theism, which makes the most sense for reality. So, if you would please like, follow, subscribe, all that typical YouTube jargon, but smash that like button. But we're very excited. So I'm going to keep the intros very brief. That way we can get into the good stuff here. So first we have representing the theistic side of the argument. We have our good friend that was on with us earlier this week, Landon. How are you this evening, sir?
Hey man, I'm very glad to be on. Thank you guys so much for giving me some of your time. You know, for every now and again, a Friday is a date night, but instead we're all just going to be hanging out and talking some cool stuff. So I'm excited.
That must be nice. I don't really know what that's like. So
well, I'll put it this way: the reason I don't have any money for this date night this Friday is because date night was last Friday, so it's fun. But
yeah.
Cool. Nope. And again, Landon, twice 1 week. Thanks for your time, brother. We appreciate it, and we'll have all of Landon's footage or content up here shortly. We had a little bit of a internet glitch there in the middle of his, so we have to do some editing, so we make sure it's professional and everything. But you'll be able to see his night when he sat at the round table with Mike and I, and it was a great discussion. So the next, representing the skeptical or atheist position in the argument, in the debate, is the one and only Mike. How are you, sir?
I'm great, man. I'm very happy to be here, and I wanted to say, very typical of Landon to take some shots at me, at the beginning. No, I'm just kidding.
brother.
No, yeah. I'm excited. Me and Landon are both nerdy wrestling fans, and it's awesome because everybody that I've told about this debate I've prefaced with it's like, this is someone I really like, so it's gonna be fun. It's not gonna be like a yelling match, so you don't have to worry about all that.
No, we're it's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be a great discussion. So I am simply here as the mod, but like we had a little bit of a pre-show discussion, the three of us, and I don't. These two guys are both respectful, intelligent men, so I don't think I'm gonna have to jump in other than doing making sure we're staying within our time restraints and that kind of thing, and respecting that. So I am pulling up my timer here, and with Landon having the position of the affirmative and the God claim, the theistic stance, he will be the first on the clock. So I have my timer pulled up. Landon, as soon as you start talking, I will start it. And for the listeners, it's 10-minute openings, 10-minute rebuttals, and then we'll have 20-minute open discussion or dialogue, and then we will go to Q&As. So make sure you're tagging in your question who you want that question directed to, and I'll make sure they get it. So Landon, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, very quickly, my name is Landon Tucker. I'm from Alabama, home in the university, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is where the university is. Here, I'm very excited to be here tonight. Very glad to be able to be here with these guys. Tonight, I believe we're going to be looking at evidence. I think we need to look tonight at evidence with Mike and I as if we're detectives looking at a murder case. We need to examine the evidence and then try to make a claim. I believe that saying simply his way is not right, or if we want to stay true to sort of criminal psychology, that person's not that person is not the murderer. I don't necessarily think that is going to be super helpful without providing some sort of a claim on our own. And we can work through that. It's just kind of a stance that I have. Otherwise, we're not really good detectives. This is kind of the greatest crime scene of all time as we sit here talking about it tonight. And so I think we need to kind of look at what's going on. Now, my first proposed reason theism is true, it best explains reality, is actually focused on what science, we'll go into what science is, but first what science is not. And the first thing is science cannot explain everything. I believe in theism. I believe there's a creator to our universe. Let me start by saying, however, that proof in a creator is not proof that is mathematical, such as 3 + 3 = 6. Rather, we're to gather evidence for or against it and view the conclusion. Now, this does require some faith at the end of the day. God can, but to this point has not spoken to me in an audible voice. But it is clear to me that the evidence of him being a personal and all-powerful creator provides evidence to theism. I'm not lost on the fact that theism does not prove that it is the Christian God that I personally believe in. I get that. But I believe it does start the process of investigating and start to wonder and question who, if there is one, the true God is. This is not necessarily what I'm going to be speaking all about tonight. I will be clear in the setup of both sides. The atheists and the theists I do respect. I believe they're both making very bold claims. The agnostic is something I don't necessarily understand. Not the fact that they doubt at all. That's not my point. But the fact that that is something that that they're kind of in the middle of. Even very famous, renowned atheist Dr. Christopher Hitchens says that agnosticism rather, is evasive. He doesn't like it. Dr. Michael Shermer, now this is a little crude, but I think it's very funny. Dr. Michael Shermer, who's an atheist, I think you guys are both familiar with, says that agnosticism is simply atheism without balls, which again is very crude. I think it's a funny way to look at it. I do believe that atheists, if they're going to say there's no God, I think some of you guys would actually agree with too, do have faith. They just have faith. They have trust that God does not exist. And maybe tonight that's something that Mike will be able to display some of the reasons he is confident. He has some trust in the fact that God does not exist. I would like to think that most atheists rely on science for being the reason they think they can disprove God. But the question, does God exist? Is it scientific or philosophical? It's philosophical. The problem is science cannot answer philosophical questions. I mean, literally that one right there. Why can't science answer philosophical questions? There's no scientific formula. So there must be reason outside of science for the reason why things are the way that they are. The most fundamental philosophical question ever is why. Now, theism tells us the reason science is possible is because there is a creator who created the universe and created the mind to learn, to test a hypothesis, to wonder. But my proposed reason, too, is fine-tuning argument. And this is something that is not new for a lot of you guys, but it is very important to what I believe. University of Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy talks about the fine-tuning of the earth, the strength of gravity, when measured against the strength of electromagnetism, seems fine-tuned for life. They said, if gravity had been absent or substantially weaker, galaxies, stars, planets would not have been formed in the first place. Had it been only slightly weaker or electromagnetism was slightly stronger, main sequence such as stars such as the sun would have been significantly colder and would not have exploded into supernova, which are main source of the heavier elements. Now, this is a very famous John Lennox quote. I think it's very important, though. Science can tell you that if you put cyanide into your grandmother's tea, it'll kill her. But what it cannot tell you is why it's wrong to do so. Now, we have these inherent feelings on our mind, in our hearts. Don't get me wrong. But I believe even that is backed behind this idea of that there is a God. I do want to talk to the Christians for a moment. I do not think we should simply see a gap and say God did it. That's sloppy science. We need to take initiative and figure out why things are the way that they are. Otherwise, I don't think we can necessarily expect to be taken seriously by somebody else that we are trying to convince. We need to look at why things are the way that they are. Now, we would both likely agree, the theists and the atheists, that there are some things we'll never know. Is there intelligent alien life? What is dark matter? Why can't we see it? Is there a lost city of Atlantis? Did the real Slim Shady ever stand up? All of these things are things that we wonder over time, and maybe we might not ever be able to get the answer from it. Now, I do want to focus on this. One of these two things has to be true when it comes to the very beginning of the universe. I understand this is very elementary. You guys have heard some of these things before. I do think it's very important, however, that A, the kind of an atheistic view, nobody created something out of nothing, or B, someone created something out of nothing. Now, I understand this part I'm about to mention is something that Mike does not agree with, if I understand correctly, but I do want to kind of paint a picture in case there's an atheist who does. And that's kind of this idea that Dr. Lawrence Krauss, the theoretical physicist at Arizona State, believes that the universe was able to kind of combust, expand out of nothing because of quantum mechanics. And so because of this vacuum that continues to expand, everything booms out and things happen. But a quantum vacuum is not nothing. It's something. What made the quantum vacuum? I believe you can go back far and far and far, but at some point, I believe it points to a creator. In just a moment, we'll focus on this very close. I think a question we need to ask is, why is there something rather than nothing? Now, Stephen Hawking, who's of course a very famous atheist, said in his book, The Grand Design, that the universe had a beginning, and he agrees the universe appears to be fine-tuned for life. Obviously, he does not think a creator made this, but thinks that from expanding, that things were fine-tuned. Hawking says, because there's a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. So there's our answer to the Krauss thing, right? If nothing can, what created these vacuums? Well, gravity was able to do that because it's kind of a law. But all physical laws, including gravity, had a beginning and thus needed a cause, I would imagine, right? The universe had a beginning, so it would need a cause. Now, something the atheist would say simply, I'd say probably gravity. But where did that start? My belief system tells me that there is a singular point that comes from a creator, that has a creator powerful enough to create the world, but also create each being with free will and personal minds to doubt and to wonder and to ultimately point back to their creator. Maybe tonight, he has arranged for some people who have doubted to no longer wonder, to look at the evidence that he has proposed. The last and final reason is free will. Now, gravity, while it is absolutely a very important thing that causes matters and motions to go, is an impersonal force. It just keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again. Has no kind of mind of its own. That's why the beginner had to be personal in making personal beings like you and I. Free will is so important. On page 34 on Dr. Hawking's book, he says this book is rooted in the concept of scientific determinism. Every cause in the world is a product of a prior natural event. No miracles, no exceptions. Everything is a product of a prior natural cause. Here's the issue. This says everything is a product of a prior natural cause, which means his thoughts are only put together by a prior natural cause, which means we would have no free will. He is simply a product of prior natural cause. To go further than that, Hawking doubles down further than I just did. On page 32, he says free will is just an illusion. Hawking's and atheists who believe this think we are essentially in a dream. But how do you know you're in a dream? You wake up. How do they know they're in the matrix? They had to be out of the matrix to see what was going on. How much time, Austin?
Sorry, I was muted. You have 1 minute and about 15 seconds.
All right, here we go. All right. And this is something that I have on one of my 6 videos on TikTok, but I think it is very important. Our Earth currently is blazing around 67,000 miles an hour, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And as it's doing that, we have the sun, or I guess essentially you could say the sun has us, but depending on how you look at it. But the Earth tilts very perfectly at 23.5 degrees. The reason this is important is because if it did not tilt, we would become tidally locked, which means one side of the Earth would be stuck facing the sun, becoming warmer and warmer and warmer until it could not sustain life. The other side, colder and colder and colder until it could not sustain life. Now, there are so many of these very tiny, very minuscule things that if you just changed one dial, we wouldn't all be here. Now, I think I know the rebuttal to some of this from at least some people. Some might say the Earth will fall apart someday, so we're not really finely tuned. But to finish up, the temporal duration of something is irrelevant to whether or not it's been designed. And the way I can prove this to you, I have a car that's broken down 3 times in the past 2 weeks. It's going to break down probably sooner rather than later. However, I know it had a creator. And I believe that theism points to the fact that we have a creator because the Earth is in the perfect place. We have morals to see things that are right or wrong, and we can point to the answers of these questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Landon, for that. And then just so everybody knows, in our pre-show dialogue conversation, we did agree that if either Landon or Mike went over their time, that however long they went over, the other party was allowed the same time over. So Landon, you went a total of about 13 seconds over. So if Mike, if you need that time, you'll have that extra 13 seconds as well. But again, thank you for your opening statement, Landon. We appreciate it. And now we will move along to the atheist argument on what best explains reality. Mike, let me get the timer ready here.
13
right,
extra seconds. It's it'd be called injury time, as my father would put it, soccer wise.
And the floor is yours. And then as soon as you begin speaking, I will set the timer.
For sure. Yeah, I'm ready. All right. The topic tonight, theism versus atheism, which is more reasonable. encompasses a fairly broad yet valuable issue to discuss here. Given the general scope of the chosen topic, I feel it's somewhat important to distinguish what my position actually entails. So atheism, generally speaking, can be broken up into two components: strong atheism and weak atheism. I know there's some atheists that might disagree with this. I think this is a better example to use to lay out my position. So we can look at strong atheism as I think X is false, and we can look at weak atheism as I am not convinced of X. And one might think to themselves, why even draw this distinction? Is it even relevant to the debate? And the distinction for me is important to point out because I am not going to be arguing from the position that claims to have proven a universal negative, this being strong atheism and the claim that a God does in fact not exist. Rather, I'm going to apply the same methodology I use when engaging any claim, and that starts with what is known as the null hypothesis. Simply stated, the null hypothesis is the default position. If I was to use an example, say we didn't understand the chemical reaction or causation of a fire, and someone walks along and they posit the idea that it is fire causing pixies. So I would take the null hypothesis and accepting neither claim that it's a chemical reaction or fire causing pixies, because the most important and overlooked element here is the observation, testing, and repeatability to move towards justifying what that conclusion might be. Once applied, we might find out that the causation was natural for reasons X, Y, and Z, and at no point were these proclamations of truth, but rather an assessment of reasonable certainty. So we basically have a system where every claim is assumed to not be true until demonstrated to be true. And if anyone that had an objection to that standard in the methodology, they would have to answer the question, what would there be to fear about investigation or scrutiny if the claim is verifiable and true? If this somehow now gets into a point where we're making excuses for why this claim isn't verifiable, it then starts to become indistinguishable from a claim that is not true. We hear constantly that God is mysterious or that we can't understand his nature. And this creates what's called a panacea, or an all-encompassing non-answer in which he can violate the laws of identity and non-contradiction. This is indistinguishable from a claim that is simply not true or saying that magic did it. In science, or to say naturalism, it is shown to be that if you want to be more wrong than often, you will start with believing the hypothesis before you actually test it. And this delves into circular reasoning, more often a special pleading fallacy, where the proposed being on trial is presumed to exist beyond verification, and the verification involved, for hypothetical sense, isn't even tangible when we put it to the investigation. And so why is this the case? We're now at a fundamental disagreement where one of us thinks it's reasonable to have a lower set of standards of evidence and the other wants to implore higher standards of evidence. How do we go about solving this? I think at this point of the disagreement, it would be wise to point out, what it entails to have standards of evidence. For each claim made in the world, we have to possess some standard of evidence. Otherwise, we would just believe anything anyone tells us at any given time. If Landon had told me he had a cat, I could go to his house, I could see a water bowl, I can see some fur, and I could be reasonably justified to say he has a cat without actually having to see the cat. By the way, Austin, will you mute your mic?
It's muted.
Austin. Oh, whoever's muted, not muted. It's making some noise. So now let's assume Landon, for some explainable reason, lied about owning the cat. I don't know why he would do this, but for the sake of the argument, he's lied about owning this cat. Does this show that my standards of evidence is not valuable? Does this show that the methodology I implied is not valuable? Well, I would say that the standards of evidence in which I applied is the thing that's not valuable in this case. I've lowered them to a level that didn't comport to the conclusion of the claim being made. So I could take this experience, acknowledge that these standards didn't justify the conclusion, and then raise them and hopefully apply them going forward. But my biggest takeaway from this situation is that my worldview is unchanged. Nothing about being wrong about this claim fundamentally changes my worldview in any way. All I can take from this is that I need to evaluate my standards of evidence and buckle down on them. And perhaps if there is a higher claim, something that has to deal with the nature of reality, I might need to raise that. So if we use this example with God, would it be reasonable for me to now lower or raise these standards? Given I was hypothetically wrong about the conviction of a cat, would it be wise for me to lower the standards when I was just proved wrong? This will climb up a ladder, and I know this isn't part of the topic tonight, but what makes this worse is that even if we just assume this God exists, what standards of evidence are we applying to know that it's any one of the Abrahamic gods, Vishnu or Odin or Thor? I mean, what if this God does exist, but we've chosen the wrong one? How do we go about determining that? I'd be curious at this point to see if any theist had any objection to applying a loose standard of evidence at that point. And the hypotheticals only demonstrate the need and desire to have those standards of evidence. So if I go back to the starting point and the main issue here, the theist might propose some form of inductive or abductive reasoning based on perhaps some form of a logical syllogism, or maybe they'll cite arguments based on a teleological, cosmological, or modal ontological argument. And the consistent issue with any one of these philosophical arguments is that it starts with conflating our experience with reality. Our experience is not indicative of the actual external world. For example, if we use the teleological argument, we're immediately engaged in an argument from ignorance or personal incredulity. If you're arguing from this conviction, it is to argue from a rudimentary lack of understanding of a process of change. Beyond that, we're incredulously presuming that without willingness to accept natural causation, that by default it must be supernatural causation. And we don't have any demonstration of this. The argument lacks, or it looks at the fact that we exist under a certain set of universal conditions that we don't fully understand. And it says that our existence is proof of those conditions and that they must have been put in place by an intelligent being. And that is all under the basis of that we can't think of a better reason. It's a God of the gaps fallacy. It's an argument from ignorance. And then to not accept the natural causation is an argument from incredulity. So whichever argument we use, it's dependent on the person to both lower their standards and argue from that ignorance or personal incredulity. And to end off, we don't employ these biases within science or naturalism because of that reason. They are based in incredulity, circular reasoning, or special pleading, and for which we have a demonstrated history of that getting us to the wrong answer more than it getting us to the right answer. And so that said, I should mention, science doesn't make any proclamation of truth. All it does is give us reasonable certainty, and we can't assume the hypothesis to be true until it's reasonably justified or warranted. Evidence for a proposition is entirely different than sufficient evidence to warrant the conclusion. And with that said, I'll pass the remainder of my time to the moderator.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your opening statement as well. And both gentlemen, that was very nicely done, and lots of great points made on both sides. And for those that are in the chat room, first of all, thank you. Great conversations going on there, guys. Just so you know, as you guys are sharing your arguments, it's been awesome to read those so long. And the one thing I want to point out, because nobody's said anything yet, but obviously it's the Atheist Roundtable, and as the mod, yes, I share the atheist standpoint, but the one thing that both these guys know is I'm gonna play it down the middle, and I do have a very strong understanding of the theist position as well. And so anything does come up, do we have questions, I'm gonna do my best to play it down the middle, and I just want to make sure that's clear, because I didn't say that before we started. So and Landon knows this, even in our roundtable discussions, it's not a debate format, it's a discussion. We still are very much about playing it down the middle and asking the tough questions, but it not being a ugly shouting match and cussing back and forth and all that. So but no, again, thank you both for the opening statements, and why we have a couple of spare minutes there in between. Mike did not use his 13 seconds, so he loses that. But again, reminder for everybody that is in here right now, at the end of the debate, we will have a Q&A session for Landon and Mike. And just make sure in the comment section that you let me know who the question is directed towards. That way I can do it. We'll try to get to all of them. I don't know if we'll have time to do that. And then we will actually cut this feed, and then I will launch usually about there was the timer.
I think that's the same timer used for like Slime Time Live in Nickelodeon, but I'm just throwing that out.
I use that one because it's impossible to wake me up. Like I'm a deep sleeper. That's the only one that wakes me up.
Yeah, you ain't sitting through that, man.
No, it's right next to my ear. But we'll end this, and usually about 10 minutes after the this live feed, we'll start a new live feed, and we call it the after party. And you, whether atheist, theist, agnostic, whatever it is, come, and we just have an open discussion. And either in the chat box, or if it's something where we feel it's necessary, we'll include you in on the video. If we want to get further into it, but we'd love to have as many of you join us as you want. But just know in the after party, I do smoke cigars and drink, and we do have a little more fun in the after party. We try to keep it as professional and structured as we can on here. So that being said, Landon, you have 10 minutes for your rebuttal of Mike's argument, and as soon as you start speaking, we'll hit the timer.
Real quick, this is not necessarily cross-examination. This is just straight rebuttal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I was iffy on that. I didn't know if it was cross-examination or if we went straight to just a rebuttal.
On the rebuttal,
is that okay? And he does vice versa. Is that all right?
Sure. I actually think that would be valuable too.
Yeah, what I was going to say is when I say rebuttal, it probably sounds a little too constraint. Don't be afraid to ask questions to build your points or your argument against his. It doesn't have to just be straight another 10 minutes of you talking. So
yeah, I think both of us probably couldn't come up with 10 minutes of things off the top of our head. So, but yeah, I think that'd be perfect.
All right, so going off, and I just have a couple of things here. I think as far as things that are written, whenever we're going back and forth, I think it'll be a little more natural. But so Mike, you would say or consider yourself a proponent of weak atheism. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that proving the universal negative that a God doesn't exist entails the exact same burden of proof that a God does exist. But I lack the belief of a God, therefore atheism.
Sure. Okay. I got you. All right. So if you kind of have this bridge of, I don't really know if there's a God that exists, and as opposed to saying a strong atheism, which would say I absolutely know there's no God that exists. Whenever I had things written down. Obviously, I know your position, I believe you stated that beforehand. And so I did try to speak to agnosticism. So whenever you say, what would you consider yourself? Would you say agnostic, or would you say I'm a weak atheist? Like, what would you characterize if you had to?
I think there's an issue with people that define agnosticism, because agnosticism is a subset of belief. It addresses knowledge. So you don't go around saying I'm a Gnostic, because Gnostic means 100% knowledge, and agnostic is not 100% or not 100% certain, I guess, if we put it in loose terms. So I would be an agnostic atheist. So if you want, I can argue from an agnostic perspective, but I lack the belief of God. Therefore, I'm an atheist. I think people think agnosticism is a position, and I see arguments for it, but I disagree with the position, because you either believe in a God or you do not believe in a God. So you are either a theist or you are an atheist. And that's, I think, what has to do with your statement in the opening statement about, I don't know if it was Shermer or who you said, but they say, I was an agnostic, but then Stephen Colbert basically said, you're an agnostic or you're an atheist without balls. The difference there is just the fact that one addresses knowledge. If I was a Gnostic atheist, I would be 100% convinced that God doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So
all right, gotcha. So kind of being in the middle, or pardon me, not the middle, but you understand what I'm saying. Not in terms of I don't believe in a God. It's kind of there. If would you say it's impossible for someone to just be an atheist, that there's absolutely no God whatsoever? Is that an impossible claim to make?
No, it's not an impossible claim to make, but I I laid out the null hypothesis for the benefit of what I would call naturalism. And, for me, it's what better explains reality, naturalism or theism. So I'm on the position that the null hypothesis better explains it because it reserves judgment. It reserves judgment until evidence is warranted.
I gotcha. Which you laid that out very well. I did want to ask, whenever you mentioned, you said like if you were to come across a fire and basically we could claim that, if I'm getting your words a little bit mixed up here, but let's say pixies started a fire, you would not, you cannot disprove that pixies didn't start it, even though it's obvious that they didn't, right?
Sure.
If that's the same thing when it comes to God, why is it? Why do you feel it is important to be someone obviously very well spoken and knowledgeable, but on this front of making basically, let's just say, proofs that God does not exist, or if anything else, if you can't really disprove anything anyway, and those folks who believe in it might be a little folly in their thinking. What in your sense is the purpose of doing that and making that your stance?
That's a great question. I want to be I want to believe as many true things as possible and limit the amount of false things as possible. So for me, to say it's not necessarily about whether or not, so we'll use your fire example. I am not in the position to go, oh, hey, the chemical reaction sounds more likely. It sounds more likely than the God. What I do there is I don't believe any of these claims. I don't believe it, but both of them. What can I do to get me to believing in the claims? And this might not be a dichotomy. So that's why I take them off the table, because we got two people proposing fire causing pixies or chemical reactions. I throw away the dichotomy and I go, what's the answer? How do I get the answer? So I apply investigation from the null hypothesis, which is that I don't accept a claim until it's proven. So for me, I don't know if this is answering it, but for me, it's any claim. It doesn't matter if it's God or 9/11 was a conspiracy or ghosts exist or whatever it is. I won't accept the claim, and I lack that belief until it is warranted or justified. Does that answer?
Oh yeah.
Maybe I missed.
It does.
Okay.
No, you did a very good job answering that. My follow-up question to that, however, is I agree with you. We need to be able to find out more true things than not, of course. But with the amount of things that are not true, for instance, I mean, like literally you and I, we joked about the other day, but there's this dude on social media who's claiming to be the risen Christ. Like, come on now, this guy's ridiculous. Or just all of the things we see, man, just on that crazy platform where people say misinformation, or whatever the case may be. Why is it important to you to make sure that this is an area that you study? This is an area that you make sure you focus on.
Well, that's amazing. I think I should have tied that into that last one better. Because this, and not to sound offensive, because of what I'm passionate about in this regard, has nothing to do with your God or religion. It has to do with how we just generally know things. So me and you talking to each other right now is the process, or is the product of respecting that process. We didn't just decide, hey, this works and that works, and then let's try it. We had an unbiased, or at least as unbiased as we possibly could, because we're humans and we're not robots.
Sure. But
we had a methodology that we implemented to get us to a point where now we have reasonably been justified to say, hey, this works this way and this does that. So it's important for me, because if you make a decision to say this is unexplained and God did it, or magic did it, or whatever it is, without actually demonstrating to show why that is the case, I think that creates a fundamental flaw and error in every aspect of your reasoning. I think that right there allows you to make the same mistake in everything you do. And now I do TikTok. I would rather focus on these people that think 5G causes coronavirus, or that these witches can actually do these things, even though they're conflating it with the ideomotor effect. I would so much rather focus on that. Like those are my things. It's a little far and few between. But for me, I think it's valuable because we don't live in a vacuum, and I have to share space with these people that think this. And my kids, if I have kids, they have to inhabit this place where people think this. I want us to not have that form of our rationality fuzzy in any sense where we make these mistakes.
So you make a very good point. Being able to make sure that you test these, I'll just say, I'll call it a theory, or these ideas or worldviews. I think it's very important. And even you mentioned there's things that probably interest you more that you'd rather make sure that you correct or get the correct information. Yeah. But when I'm just simply talking about if there's a God or there's not, to you personally, why is it important that you spend time focusing on this?
Well, I mean, for one example, I live in the South, and I see kind of the elements of bigotry that come out of it, depending on what the religion is.
Sure,
if we take Christianity, for example, we have, and I think we might touch on this later, but we have things in regards to moral arguments and what is right, what is wrong, what a woman can do with their body, what they can't, all those types of things. So those have very huge impacts on our legislation and our bodily autonomy and things of that nature. So for me, it's important because I love my gay friends, and I love my trans friends, and I love my people that want to express themselves. And when I see people who are identifying, say, as a theist or a Christian, and they are not justifying their identity and then casting bigotry on people and claiming that they haven't justified their identity, I see hypocrisy, and it angers me. So there's a little bit of anger. There's a little bit of, I want people to understand the truth. There's a little bit of everything. I mean, I would say the main focus is that I don't think that this topic should be exclusive to religious people. I think people like myself who are engaged in these conversations that are willing to say, I don't know, I think we're allowed to have these conversations. And I don't think you would take that away from me either. But
of course not. No.
I love that question because I get people every day. I get hundreds of messages a day on my TikTok platform where people tell me, why do you care? And I think there's ample reason to care.
All right, guys, that's the 10 minutes there for Landon's rebuttal time frame, and again, great discussion between you two, and you guys are causing or stirring up great conversations in the chat room as well. Keep my eye on that, but
the unfortunate, can I speak to that also just for a moment? The unfortunate part about that, just about how comments are, and you guys know, obviously, reading your comments all day, what's going on right here is so much more productive than this right here, because you don't know the tone, you don't know the person's back. As you guys mentioned, you don't know the background. I'd encourage anybody who's having discussions, if it's passionately, I'm sure, to maybe dive into getting somebody's email, or maybe diving into getting somebody's, whatever the case may be, just so you can go further into it. Because I just don't remember the last time anyone said anything as a comment that I was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I feel really dumb. He's right, and just walked away, or even said, sure, hey, yeah, you did a great job, make me feel stupid. So just an encouragement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And we the Atheist Roundtable is open to theists, atheists, agnostics. You don't know what whatever it is, don't hesitate to contact us. My email is austin@tart.live, and then Mike's is mike@tart.live, and we would love to have you on. We love having those open discussions, and we love debates like this because there's a lot of good conversations to be had. But for me personally, I love to debate, but that open dialogue and that you just pouring your heart out and you're going from the heart and you're talking from the gut, to me, that's when not only do you start to kind of solve some issues and find agreements and disagreements, but sometimes just it's fucking therapeutic to do that. So we'd love to have you on. Email us, and we'll usually I kind of do a phone screen and talk to people and see kind of the background, what they want to discuss, and that sort of thing. But we'd love to have you on if you want to have that open dialogue. But again, great conversation there, guys. Appreciate that. We're rocking and rolling. And then Mike, you have your 10 minutes rebuttal, or just asking some questions to Landon his original argument. And as soon as you speak, I will hit the timer.
Sure. All right. Oh, sorry. Wait, not me. So Landon, I wanted to ask you, do you think it would be more reasonable to suspend your belief before having confirmation or after? Because I don't want to use your words against you in the wrong way, but I wrote that God has not spoken to you in a personal voice. So how exactly have you help me figure out this ontological gap that I'm missing, where you are now convinced that this God exists despite what I would consider insufficient evidence?
Sure. So something you brought up, you mentioned that anytime you're going to test a hypothesis, make sure the reason you can know that you can get it wrong is by believing in it kind of beforehand, and kind of having a bias beforehand. Is that correct? Is that how you phrased it?
I'm sorry. I cut out a little bit.
So what you mentioned in your opening statement, that if you're going to, let's just say, test a hypothesis, and if you believe in the hypothesis before you even test it, and you kind of have a personal tie to it, or believe to it, that's kind of how things go wrong the most. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a circular reasoning fallacy.
Yes. Okay. I'll say this. I agree with that, especially when it comes. It makes complete sense. Now, for my personal story, I became a Christian when I was young. So, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I don't think I had the thought in my mind, is God real? Okay. Yes. And now I see the Bible. Now I see this. No, absolutely not. And it kind of worked the opposite way, which would feed into that same hypothesis failure that you mentioned with the kind of the circular reason. Okay, well, I believe this, but however, with the amount of doubt that I've had, and I'm talking, really the person you're usually most honest with is yourself, and in your mind, and hopefully, the person you lie to yourself, the person you lie to most is often yourself, and then sometimes the person you're most honest with is also yourself. I've had, in these times of doubt, if God's real whatsoever, and so then obviously having to work my way back. Okay, well, I guess what my point is, I believe people can find and have a belief in God at different areas of life. Just because someone, let's just say, is it possible for someone to be able to become a Christian in the South when they're younger, have a belief in the Bible, and be a believer that way, in the exact same way someone who has never touched a Bible or has obviously does not believe in it and becomes a believer in it? Then does that disregard if it's true or not? I don't believe so. And I can clarify that. That was a little bit messy if I need to a little bit later on. But I guess what I'm saying is, if something is true or not, I don't necessarily think every single time it has to do with if you do have that belief in the hypothesis before you test it. That does not mean that every time it will not be true. I agree with you now that there's a lot of bias that goes into making those decisions that can cause you to make it fail because you believe in this thing, and you're believing it because you believe in it. Then that can kind of go haywire at times. But I don't think that if something is true, I think you can find it at different times in life, just as I did.
Sure. I think you froze on my screen, but I'm not sure if Austin's seeing that as well. Oh, nope, he's good now.
No.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
All right,
hope you look good here.
All right, cool. All right, I just wanted to make sure. I want to talk to a face that's like, frozen. It'd be hard to keep my concentration. So given that, and let's say, I'm a skeptic, I don't have this belief, I don't think it's impossible, or anything by any means. How do you demonstrate this to me? What do you use? Do you use teleological argument? Do you use these philosophical arguments, modal, ontological, cosmological? Do you use physical evidence, historical evidence? What would you use? Like, what would you give me as the best example?
Yeah. So I think I don't think everything's like this, but I think it depends on what the person's most needs help in. To give you an example. When I was younger, the thing that I doubted with the most when it comes to Christianity, or is there a God at all, is this idea of a person does not resurrect from the dead. I'm sorry. Like if it wasn't so, if we were used to it and people, oh yeah, my friend Bob resurrected last week. Oh yeah, I'd have it'd be more understandable. Obviously, people don't just resurrect out of the ground. And so if I had some more historical facts about Jesus, for instance, we talked about the minimal facts. When I was younger, I feel like I'd be able to point to that dramatically. However, there might be someone's mind who is it makes more sense to line up with the cosmological and to be able to say, okay, well, A plus B equals C. I kind of get how this works.
Sure. What would be yours though?
For me, it would be the historical facts of Jesus.
So it would be the minimal facts?
Yeah. I think you could.
Sure.
I think you rest on the minimal facts, but I do want you to understand. If I presented the minimal facts to person B, I don't think they'd automatically just start believing that Jesus is the Son of God. I mean, it's obvious, right? Because atheists know that minimal facts. But from my point of view, I think there are too many, just as far as those go, too many. I just say coincidences, if you will, too many things that could have been wrong that were not.
Sure. So why would that be convincing to you and not others? I mean, wouldn't it be a clear distinction?
Well, it depends on what people struggle with the most. I can't really tell you why some people struggle with how space, time, and matter were formed, and if people were able to resurrect from the dead. I think there's different evidences. Obviously, I think I believe there's a collective set of evidences, but I think there's some people that might be intrigued by some more than others.
Sure. I mean, do we have any evidence of anybody raising from the dead and coming back to life?
You talking about like outside of the biblical principle?
Yeah.
No.
Do we have any examples of anything supernatural?
Can you define supernatural? You don't have to be academic, but just can you give me an idea of what you're talking about?
Sure. Do we have any examples of ghosts, spirits, unicorns, gods, demons? Do we have any examples of those?
Gotcha. So let me speak first to
I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just trying to see what we would be appealing to justify the supernatural causation.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so for instance, you and I don't think, could be wrong. You might be more skilled at this than I am, but I do not believe that we could go out and go find some unicorns at this moment. I don't know for sure. I feel pretty positive. However, the basis of whenever we think about what reality is and things that kind of break the natural. So for instance, Hume, for instance, his kind of view on this was that whenever it comes to life, when it comes to how things are a natural set, people don't just raise up from the dead, or people do not just get healed and water does not just turn to wine, right? There's a cause and then there's an effect. And I'd say for the most part, I agree about that. And that's what makes that's what makes this the resurrection so important. To speak to that, I think there's things that happen, and it has happened in our history and will continue to happen, that make us go, or pardon me, that maybe it's not usually natural. And help me with the word, Mike. I'm thinking it's natural, the natural set of just natural laws, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Just natural laws. What do you call? Whenever you have resurrection, obviously that breaks a natural law.
Sure. Well, while we're on that topic, would you think those laws are prescriptive or descriptive?
I don't see how. What do you mean by that?
Do you think that they were prescribed by this God, or do you think we look at them in a descriptive way just to describe the universe around us? Because I think that would be a huge area we would have to engage.
I'm not sure I understand. Not because you didn't explain it well, probably because I'm a little slower.
Sure.
I think what you're saying is, or probably, I guess I ask you, is it possible that God prescribed for it to happen, and we are describing the events that happen? To get a little further in this, again, things happen outside of our natural law, or probably things that seem like they're not outside of, or things that seem they are in a natural flow of the law that break. To give you an example. I don't have the exact year. I believe it was 1789 or 1798, sometime in the very late 17th century, whenever testimony of peasants started to come into the scientific academic community about these really warm rocks that would fall from the sky. And people, scientists, much smarter than I am, would come to and say that that's not something that happens, and would not take the word over peasants, of course, over than academic people. Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry, was so opposed to this claim, rather, sorry, I can't think of the word, that he dismissed written affidavits saying that these stones were just artificially warmed, that this is not really how it goes. And then finally, a little bit later on, 1819, French chemist Pierre Laplace interrupted a presentation at the French Academy of Science and stated, as quoted, "We already know enough fables," and bursted out of the lecture hall whenever people were talking about meteorites. Now, obviously, you and I know meteorites exist. However,
Yeah.
it's very understandable that people during that time period would go, yeah, okay, things falling from the sky, give me a break. We don't see that. Also, they were chemists who were inside classrooms and not peasants working in fields, but that's neither here nor there.
Sure. If we have time, I really wanted to get into why you thought the fine tuning argument was because I know you mentioned that, so I don't want to just shift. But in you had written something about the fine tuning and how we are perfectly set. I was curious on your if that is a presumption, or if you would be willing to acknowledge that's a presumption, or if that's factually based.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here because we hit our 10 minutes, and you guys can come back to that.
Sure.
Nope, you're good. So the next,
me, man. Thanks for saving me.
no, both of you guys are doing great. I could tell both of you prepared very well for this. So, and I know I appreciate that, and the listeners I know appreciate that, because there's nothing worse than jumping on a debate or any type of discussion. You can tell everybody's ill prepared and really didn't give a shit enough to get ready for it. So Landon and Mike, appreciate your time and dedication to it. And just another reminder for those in the chat room, after this 20-minute open dialogue, we will go to Q&A. Just make sure that you're letting me know which person that those questions are directed towards. That way I can keep everything clear and moving on and be efficient with everybody's time. Excuse me. And then we will have the after party. So we'll break this feed and do live feed probably about 10 minutes afterwards and do an after party. Everybody hang out, smoke cigars, have drinks. Everybody's welcome. Theists, atheists, agnostics, Santa Clausists, whatever. I'm kidding.
I'm a Santa Claus, man. I wish Santa was real.
I still
I'm
think
gonna make a shout out to my buddy Corbin. Speaking of WWF, he needs to come into that after party. I know he's listening, so just throwing it out there.
Cool. And then, so we'll do that. And again, please, everybody that you jump on here, subscribe to our page, like, share. We're trying to do something that I really feel is a little different than most of the skeptic atheist stuff that I've seen. And I do a lot of research, and I consume a lot of media and content, and we're just trying to do something a little different where, we really want to get to know people, know their stories, know the situation, and vice versa, for them to get to know us. And I think at that point we can really start to have some more productive conversations, because a lot of things I listen to, it just gets.
You can tell, Austin and Mike, you can tell it's very interesting. There really is a lot of people who either enjoy this stuff or are intrigued by this stuff. There's a lot of weird things. I would say there's a lot of things in general to consume, especially on the internet and media. You're exactly right. But really, I sometimes I look at people's numbers on the Christian side and the atheistic side, and just people are really interested in this topic. And I think Austin, you said this before, people are hungry for truth, and as they should be. That is really, really relieving, because I would hope that people would take that exact same mindset into everything in life. Of course, I value this as the most important in terms of there being a God or not, and things that would mean. But seriously, think about it. If people looked at it in news cycles and everything else, and did some research and looked and chased truth, I think we'd be a lot better off, man.
Yeah. Our society as a whole would be better, and again, whether you're theist, atheist, whatever, if we all were willing to sit down and have these conversations. And don't get me wrong, there's times where the theists and atheists, you have every right to get passionate, get fiery about your stance and your argument, and all that. And sometimes people mistake, like TikTok. That's where most of us have met each other, to have these conversations. I have a persona, and I'll say it for what it is. I have a persona on TikTok that people, they do think I'm just this asshole, right? And that's just because Christians have called me that for so long, because I'm brutally honest, that I just took on the moniker. Like, okay, that's what you want to call me? Shoot,
And you're not, Austin. I just want to say, I was mentioning to somebody weeks ago that we were going to do this, and they're like, well, what's his name? And I was physically in the church building, so I was like, oh, he's the atheist a-hole. And they said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Yeah, but the funny thing is, he's not really an a-hole at all. he's a really nice guy." To which they said, "I think you should change your name to the Baptist Butthole, but I don't think I'm going to do that."
But yeah, so and it really did. I just had so many people call me that I was like, well, I might as well live up to the reputation, But the reason I said that is once people actually sit down with Mike and I, because people say that about Mike. They pardon my language, but they said, oh, my God, he's just a dick. Well, you know what? If you got to know us, you'll actually find out really quick that we love to get to know people. We love to have this conversation, and we want to learn just as much as you want to learn. So sorry I went off on a little rant there, but I think that's important to say. And anybody listening now or in the future, I want people to know the vision for this is to be different. We don't want to get on here and yell and scream and act like we're smarter than everybody because we're an atheist and because you believe in a God you're a dumbass. Sometimes some of the stuff do I think it's foolish? Yes, I'm not gonna lie. But it's about being adults and sitting down and having a real conversation like we're doing now and Landon like we did, earlier this week. So that being said, sorry for the rant there. I'm supposed to be the moderator and shut the hell up. So, I will jump into the 20 minutes. And again, after these 20 minutes, guys, it's Q&A time. And I want you guys to be as active as you want to be, can be. And there's already been a couple questions asked, and I'll make sure I get to those first. But we will start. And what I want to do, you guys can come back because you got 20 minutes. You guys can come back to the fine tuning. But the first thing that just looking at the chat room and kind of the vibe I'm taking there, and I know my own study into this topic. What I want you guys to start or this part of the 20 minutes, if you would, and this comes directly even from the Shermer and Turek debate, which all three of us are very familiar with. So I think it's a even playing ground. Is that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So I think it's Hitchens originated that, and then Shermer's continued to run with it. But and it doesn't matter to me. I don't want to pick on one side, so I can play down. You guys can decide who wants to go first. But I think that's something that this debate, this evening we should touch on. I think that's important. So again, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. What are your guys' thoughts on that? And whoever wants to go first, go first.
Sure, I'll let Landon. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean,
no, I was going to say I'll go if that's cool.
Yeah, I was going to say I take the affirmative on that in a sense. So I think I would rather hear your rebuttal to it rather than me just say the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Things that I just say without any sort of evidence, you could dismiss without any sort of thing. Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I don't. Obviously, the reason I'm here, I don't think that's the case with theism. I believe that there are evidences for it, in the way that we are created, the way our world came. But honestly, I think a lot of stuff in terms of what we are as personal human beings. Now I think the way to kind of dip out of this, but is to say, do you want evidence? Well, let's just look up and look at the trees and look at the fit. Yeah, obviously, if I say that, to anybody else, I completely understand. Be like, no, dummy. There's there's a natural cause for this, and there's those things are very clear. Or if we were to say, hey, look at this baby that was born. Okay, well, we know what happened 9 months ago and the things that follow afterwards. So there's an obvious flow to those things. That's not the evidence I'm portraying. I think you can find it again in the way that our world came about, but also the way we interact with each other. I think our morals is, of course, a huge part of that. And so I believe that is true. Austin's statement of the things you cannot, if I present something to you, I don't have any sort of evidential claim. If there's a blue tooth fairy hanging out in my bathroom, and I have no evidence for it, why should you believe it? There's no reason to. And so I would say, if there's an atheist who has a Christian friend, and I hope that they have a Christian friend and vice versa, I'm going to talk to Christians in a second. I think you should ask your fellow friend, your friend that's a believer, what their reasons are, the way that Mike has Tuesday night and then of course tonight as well. But I think those are very important.
Sure. For me, I want to draw the an example for people so that they can kind of grasp the concept of absence of evidence, and that would be one of like a bomb squad. So when a bomb squad goes in to go look for a bomb, I think me and you could both agree there's no way they're going to falsify. Like, there's no bomb in there. How are they going to empirically know that there is no bomb in that room? They have to make a decision, though, to say it's safe to come back in at some point. And so with absence of the evidence is evidence of the absence. And you have to, and this goes back into the standards of evidence, based on that, you have to apply these standards of evidence. Otherwise, you make a mistake and it's fatal. And so we use these exact same, I think, Landon is one of the first theists I've heard that actually is like, yeah, I agree with that. But a lot of times when I debate theists, they I can't even say that word right. They firmly disagree with that proposition. But, we use this in everyday life. There is no Cartesian truth. We don't know. We have reasonable certainty. And with absence of evidence is, essentially evidence of absence at that point for me. That said, it's not to say that this is an impossibility.
Well said, Mike.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said, well said, Mike. As you.
Oh, thank you, bud. Thank you, bud. So yeah, I don't want to jump the gun, but do you hold the fine-tuned argument pretty valuable?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty valuable. And you mentioned. Oh, sorry, I completely blanked out there. Yeah. No,
no, you're good.
I do. I consider it to be very valuable to think if a God created the world and made things that, even a subset of atheists who are very clever, who are smart, would say that, yeah, it appears to be fine-tuned, just not by a God. I think we actually stand on a lot more common ground than not. However, I will say this, and I mentioned it briefly in the opening statement. If we were to say that the earth has an obvious end, in however many million years, I don't think that necessarily would negate the fact that it was fine-tuned. The fact that we're all here, I think is one part of that. The other part is, and I mentioned it, but the temporal duration of how long something exists for does not kind of dismiss if it was created. So and the only reason I bring that up is I've heard that in comment sections before of saying, well, it can't be fine-tuned if it's going to end at some point. I don't believe that.
Sure, and that's actually not my my argument. So I'm kind of glad I don't have to like beat a dead horse or anything for you and say the same thing. I would compare it to two things. One, I would compare it to a deck of cards. If we take 13 cards or how many ever cards, and we just jumble them up randomly, it would be weird for us to ask why the astronomical probability is the way it is. I mean, that is the condition that is set. So I guess for a better example, and the second one would be like, and you might have heard this, but there's a poem I can't remember who the poem is by, and I really freaking wish I did. Douglas something, or maybe I'm even wrong on that. But it's a guy who draws. No, I don't even know what he is. Okay. I heard this poem and I freaking loved it. And then I've heard Shermer talk about it, but I'm actually only familiar with Shermer this week, so I've actually never really knew a lot of his points. I actually really like his stance, though.
Yeah,
something I'll get more into. But he did mention this, and this is something I've used a lot too. It's like a puddle. A puddle, if it was conscious, would find itself in its hole, thinking that this hole was designed for it. It would have this presumption that, look at this neat hole that I'm in. It fits me perfectly. Not 1 centimeter to the left, not 1 centimeter to the right. This hole fits me perfectly. But what it fails to recognize is the circumstance in which it happens to live in. And so, similarly, if the universe was created, we would still find ourselves evolved to fit within the universe. If the parameters did not allow for that, it wouldn't, but it did. So we have major issues, and this only looks miraculous on basis of experience because we we're not able to see the alternatives because most of the things that we experience have this form of a causation or this form of a builder or a watchmaker, and that is conflating our experience with the actual external reality.
Okay. I've read that before. I don't remember where I saw it. Maybe someone posted on one of their videos. I think it's pretty well put. Mm-hmm. If that was the case, however, even with our own existence and think about how things are fine tuned or not, I don't necessarily think that answers the question. Maybe you agree with me on this. It doesn't answer the question on if there is a God who created the even greater universes. So I understand it. I don't necessarily get why it's a.
What do you mean by greater universes?
So for instance, you mentioned the puddle. The puddle is just chilling on the sidewalk. Doesn't know about the extraordinary things going on outside of it. The bigger, biggerness is not a word, but I'll just use it. The massive things that are happening outside of it. It just thinks, wow, this whole is so incredible. It's so amazing. But it doesn't. Even if we pointed out that that's what the whole thought, it doesn't answer the question of, did someone create this whole and everything outside of it? I agree with you. Actually, I think that's a perfect example, though. Like, I am sitting here in this universe going, this is absolutely incredible. The way everything is put together is so amazing. The amount of things I don't understand in general is a lot, but the amount of things that I don't understand about how our world was put together is just so massive. But it still
sure. Do you think that? Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, yeah, I think it still allows us to look at this amazing world, how big it is, and how incredible, and go, wow, this is remarkable. If there's even greater things outside of our Earth, which I think is obvious and pretty possible, I don't really think I'm not really understanding what that has to do with if there's a creator or not.
Sure, because I think the issue is that you're under a presumption that it necessitates a creator. But the thing is that we're looking at the fact that we exist under a set of universal conditions that we don't fully understand yet. And so to say that our existence is proof that those conditions must have been placed by an intelligent being because we can't think of another reason is just simply an argument from ignorance. And then the unwillingness to wait for a natural explanation would be a personal incredulity fallacy, because you're unwilling to actually. So it sounds more like you're arguing from an issue from the God of the gap.
Well, I think
because I don't know if you're doing it on complexity or not.
It blanked out there for a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead. I was just saying I don't know if this has to do with like complexity or what the parameters are for you, because when you use the puddle example, I mean 99% of the known universe is inhabitable for us, and I know some people use that to their advantage in this argument, but is that not just an example of us being the if an organism exists, it has to evolve through its environment, it has to succeed and survive. So how would that necessitate a thinking being is, I guess, my misunderstanding here.
Well, even the actual puddle in and of itself, again, despite anything else that is out there, would have to have a cause. If you think about the alphabet soup analogy, I think it's just kind of funny. If we were to pour ourselves a bowl of alphabet soup, and by the way, Mike, I know you're skilled and you're educated. You understand a lot of these things I'm saying. I do want to say them because I do believe them, and maybe someone has not come across them before. So,
yeah, for sure.
But alphabet soup, for instance, if I pour myself some alphabet cereal, soup, whatever, I leave for a moment, come back to the table, and in when the little alphabet letters of the cereal, it says "take out the trash," and I kind of understand that that did not just randomly come to be. But likely that if I'm not married yet, but whenever that day comes next year, that's going to be a part. I'm going to know who that creator is. So being in a part of that puddle, it's okay to be amazed with where you are, the settings, the exact parameters of where you are in life, while also acknowledging that there might be some incredible, really large things outside of the puddle itself.
Hey guys, just so you know, you're at about 9 minutes.
Okay.
Are we doing all this on this question, or is this a part of the question part, Austin?
This is open. You guys can go whatever direction you want.
Oh,
Sure. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So that dives into the cosmological argument and getting into whether the universe has a cause. And so for me, I know I've heard you make this point about quantum mechanics and physics, but so I'm on the position, again, the null hypothesis. I can't say the universe had a cause. I can't say it didn't have a cause. From what I know about zero sum, whoever's mic that is, or whoever, I don't know if that is, but it's loud.
Oh, I just breathe.
But
I breathe heavy.
Oh, no worries. It was, I think, I don't know what, maybe it was on my end. But what we're forgetting is, a zero sum energy universe and how particles, spontaneously are combusting in and out of existence at that point. So it's hard to pinpoint causation. And whenever you say it must be contingent on a cause, I mean, is that cause contingent on another cause? I mean, did God have like an infinite series of thoughts before he made the decision to create the universe? For me, it causes an infinite regression that it's hard to even wrap my head around. But even if I was to say, sure, the universe has a cause, you're presuming that it involves an intelligent cause. And I think that's where we dive off track, because I'm okay with the universe having a cause. I'm okay with the universe not having a cause. I want to know what's true. But at no point would I think it would be warranted to just presume that an intelligent being was involved in that.
Sure. And I think what you're saying, Mike, is I think you're very right in terms of you want to be able to know the truth, kind of this way or that way. Okay, six one way, half a dozen the other. I want to know what the truth is, and that I think that's something that's important to this debate as a whole on both sides, that we both need to be chasing truth. Can I switch and ask you a question?
Of course. I'm sorry. I don't mean to throw it on you. Yeah, for sure.
You're good. I didn't know necessarily if we'd have like it's just you and me question time, or when the question time's just them, and that's on me.
You have as much time with me as you want. I won't run away or anything like that. I'll just be like, I don't know the answer. I have no fear in that. So
I feel you, man. Me too.
Yeah.
So something I think is important to ask all atheists, and you can throw this question right back at me. I think it's important to ask all Christians or theists. On your perspective, what is the most, maybe I'll say convincing, if you will. What is the most convincing argument a theist has that the things that makes you go, okay, I can kind of see where this is going, that maybe you don't believe, but is there one that you'd go, okay, yeah, there's that one?
Nope.
Nothing. Okay.
Nothing, not at all. I don't have a single. I'm not trying to be like facetious. If I had an argument, I wouldn't be an atheist. I've been an atheist for 15 years, and I haven't heard a compelling. And this is not to say the arguments aren't external, reality kind of Cartesian truth sense. Mm-hmm. Nothing is what I would consider reasonably justified.
Gotcha. And when I say that, I don't mean that's something that you believe in, obviously, but maybe something that you ponder on a little longer. I got that question actually from something with Christopher Hitchens, and someone asked him that, and he
sure. I mean, I doubt every now and then. I mean, I'll doubt for sure. Maybe hey, maybe there is a God or something. But at no point do I have justified reason, or do I think that I have any warrant to think that. But I had those thoughts going till I was 13 or 14.
Sure.
So it's just a product of me trying to get rid of that nature, in the sense of that I relied on it at one point.
And I'm not trying to play any sort of gotcha. I'm just genuinely curious. Whenever you say like, okay, yeah, maybe there is a God, does that thought pop in your head? It's just kind of random. It's not really tied to anything. Or is it whenever you're kind of studying something, you go, okay, well, all right, this. I promise I'm not writing it down and go, let me hone in on this. I'm just wondering.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that philosophical arguments can be very deceiving to atheists. I think that I could understand why somebody would take a modal ontological argument, for example, and say, yeah, you know what? Plantinga's modal ontological argument makes sense. But the problem with that is it's the same problem with all of them. They presume things, and they also conflate conceivability with probability, and even worse, probability with actuality. And so for me, I don't care how much I can mentally stimulate myself into thinking something is potentially true or conceivably true. I care about. I'm a methodological naturalist. I'm a materialist. I care about what is
What
created. I mean, so I can see how these word games are and things, but I think it's an error of language.
Okay. Which, by the way, whenever you talk about having that you should not get caught up in just kind of, I can't remember how you said it. You said it pretty well spoken. How you think you can overthink yourself or something of that nature into believing something. How'd you phrase that?
Well, I just think that you can conflate conceivability with probability,
Sure.
and then
Okay.
miss probability from actuality.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Which again, we can use that in a lot of different ways, man. I remember a lot of times in high school, I was like, I feel like it's very possible this girl's going to text me back, man. I got a really good feeling, and it was not true the whole time. But you think about it.
Sure. And so it's like with the modal ontological, it's like, a maximally great being. I can think of this maximally great being, therefore this. For me, it's like, I can think of theists that owe me a maximally great amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
and then in a possible world, these theists owe me that maximal amount of money. So therefore, in all possible worlds, all theists owe me the maximal amount of money. But all you're doing is just taking word games and applying them. And I do not want to sound offensive, but like, I kind of wish those arguments worked, because then I could just define Katy Perry as being my girlfriend in some possible world and then make it true in the actual world. But the problem is in naturalism, we can go talk to Katy Perry and she go, I don't know who that guy is, but I'm going to put a restraining order on him. Like there's things in with reality that we have to abide by, and we can think about these things all we want. But I just don't think they're served as any good argument. Because I actually disagree with the statement you made in your opening statement about science not being able to deal with philosophical questions. I think it absolutely can.
How so? Like even the example I gave, I think was, why can't science answer philosophical questions? What would that? Or you don't have to have an exact thing to that. But
so
do you think there is a way to?
No, yeah. Sure. The cosmological argument is a philosophical one. We'd have agreement on that, right?
Say
the cosmological argument, the Kalam. We would agree that the Kalam cosmological argument is one of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What if we prove that the universe didn't have a cause?
I'd say that would be a what if. I don't believe that.
Do you think it's impossible that naturalism could determine that the universe had a cause or didn't have a cause?
Yeah, I'd say.
Or better yet, do you think it's possible? I guess better yet.
Can you state it one more time? I want to make sure I'm clear.
Could naturalism or could methodological naturalism or science determine that the universe had a cause or didn't have a cause, whichever one?
Gotcha. I would say no, because of the fact that we're here.
So you don't think it would be possible to determine the causation or the lack of causation depending on contingency or necessity?
Are you saying like it would be possible to disprove that the universe had a cause completely? Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying it would be impossible.
Yeah, I don't think it would be possible because of the fact that we're here and things did happen, and thus everything to this point has come about because of a cause.
All right, so guys, I'm gonna jump in. That's the
thing. Yeah, sorry.
Nope, you're good. And if that comes back up in the questions, we can dive back into that. But I want to make sure
Mike was about to whoop me again, man. Austin got me, man.
And that's something. Even after party, if people want to jump in, that's what that's for, is to have that. Or even the other night, I can't remember who. It was when we had Chris Crazy God Story from TikTok on in the after party. We talked about the content, but then somehow we ended up talking about who the best rapper alive is. So so the after party, we can get into a little bit of everything. Oh my god!
And then he showed us Khan, and I was like, ooh.
According to Lil Wayne, not according to Landon. He said in his song, "I'm the best rapper alive."
Oh, okay. I thought that was your opinion. I was about to. You're about to drop down a couple pegs in my book there, Landon.
The song says, man.
Yeah, I'd like to give I would love to give a shout out to Mark, because Mark is awesome. We talk all the time on TikTok, so he's a cool guy. I wouldn't say all the time, but more often than I talk to other people.
So before we go, before we move forward, so everybody in the chat room, now's the time to start asking your questions, and we can dig into that. So just make sure you let me know. I'm kind of overseeing the chat room right now, so make sure you let me know if it's for Landon or for Mike. And I'm seeing a lot of the comments in the chat room right now, so I'll just tell you my email is austin@tart.live. If you want to be part of our Discord, just email me and I'll make sure you get the links and everything. We have a great time in there, and there, again, it's atheist, theist, agnostic, it's Buddhist, Hinduist, all of that. And what I love about it is, yes, we get heated and it gets contested sometimes, but it's civil and respectful, and we have great conversations in there. So let's start asking some questions. We'll start getting those lined up. But in the meantime, we wait for those to start rolling in. Landon, again, appreciate your time, brother, and great job. I can tell you prepared, and I know you said earlier your first, not just your first debate, but you had the balls on your first debate to go live on a YouTube channel, and we've had some great interaction on there. So first of all, congratulations on your first one. I know I don't know about you, but the first time I did one, I was super pumped. That I did it and got it done and over with, so to speak. But I could tell you prepared. I could tell you put time and effort into it, and all of us, Mike and I, and all the listeners, we appreciate that. So great job.
Thanks, man. Thank you guys very much. I've said it Tuesday, but I'll say it again. Thank you guys very much for providing a platform to be able to do that, and also, I really appreciate you guys for, there is a sense in a lot of the world that there's a lot of kind of militant atheists as well as Christians. I'm not going to get it backwards. And so from a Christian perspective, being afraid to come on a show because of that, you guys don't, and also vice versa. If there's an atheist who don't want to come on a show that's Christian because they're being militant, I understand that too. So anyway, I appreciate you guys, and the way that you guys speak, the way that you guys respect kind of the whole group and the formality of it. I think that's that's very good. So thank you guys so much.
No, and we appreciate, and we do we want to
appreciate you. I'll say I appreciate you letting me debate you on short notice because of Austin's inability to do it. No, I'm just kidding.
Appreciate Mike. And
he called me. He was like, "Dude, I'm sweating this debate, man. I need you to do this for me."
Yeah, Austin's a dad, man. So look, Austin's got stuff he's got to do all the time. So I understand. Pardon me. Let me first say I don't understand the flexibility because I don't have kids. So I'm not pretending I do. But I'm just saying you got stuff you got to do and take care of, man. So Mike, thank you so much for doing it at the last moment.
Sure. Yeah, it was. See, and I wasn't even going to say anything.
I got 6 chats.
Originally it was supposed to be Landon and I, and then it was just a bit when you have a blended family. I have children. My girlfriend has children, and you get combined. We have six kids, and I didn't want to try to debate with 4 or 6 kids in the next room. That's why a couple of times you've seen me blank the screen out so I could beat some ass. No, I'm kidding. So now I sound like a terrible father. So what I want to do, and Mike, I know you and I talk all the time, but thank you. I can tell you as well put the time and energy into it, and very well done, good sir. And both of you kicked ass. It was a great conversation. So thank both of you. Thank you both.
Yeah, man. Hey, also I want to point out if Austin knows this. From what my understanding of Mike, knows this a little better as terms of experience, but in terms of churchy and church words, if ever I come across and I start speaking a lot of things that you guys, I'm being very serious. I want you to point me out and say, Landon, those are church words. We don't know what you're talking about, or like we do know what you're talking about, but don't talk in church words. And help me out. Sometimes I get on a talking, and I don't want to just do that.
Oh, brother, if there's anybody who's going to call you out on Christianese, that's me.
Christianese, that's right. That's what they call it, isn't it? I don't think I use the word righteousness or any of those things. I do say brother just because I just do it. So that's just how it goes.
Yep. All right. So one question popped up, but I want to go back real quick because earlier there was a question really geared at both of you. Obviously, it's gonna sound a little different depending on the worldview. But the first part of the question, Mike, was directed at you, and the person asked, "What would it take, or what amount of evidence, or what does the evidence have to look like in order to convince you that there is a God?"
It's a good question. The evidence would take anything that I believe in. I know there's an arcade cabinet to my left of me. Why do I know this? I can feel it, I can touch it, I can smell it, I can play it, I can do things with it, I can demonstrate its existence. Without those kind of features, without that verification, so if you tell me that you I guess, what is it? I can't remember who fucking wrote this, but it's like telling me you have this invisible thing in your garage, like an invisible elephant. And when we go to look at it, you're like, well, it's invisible. You can't see it, but I'll put flour on the ground and then we'll see its tracks. But then you tell me that, well, actually it hovers above the ground, so it won't make tracks. It's like, okay, well then I'll shoot a paintball gun at it. We'll see the paint splatters. As inhumane as that sounds, I know Pete is already all over us. Then that's when someone tries to tell me that it can't be splattered by paint, And the point I'm trying to make is that at any point of which I try to gather verification or honestly ask for the existence of this God, it's not presented to me, and it's indistinguishable from that God not being real. So that God knows exactly what would convince me. I mean, it knows me. If it existed, it knows if it's maximally great and all the aforementioned things, it knows exactly what would convince me. This whole argument about looking at the trees, or you missed it, you didn't see God's message. No. He knows exactly what would convince me, and either chooses not to, doesn't want to, it doesn't exist, or doesn't want me to know it exists. And for either one of those propositions, it's not my problem. But what I can do is use the cognitive reason and ability, if that God exists, to determine what is true and not. And if that God decides to not value that in its own admission for existence, I don't see why it's even worth worship at that point. But okay. For me, it would just, I would be willing to say anything. Just show yourself. I'd be willing to take any kind of thing, one little tiny thing.
Okay.
So,
and then I just get nothing. Landon on the other side of that. The same viewer asked, what would it take for you to as I call it, what would it take for you to deconvert?
So first off, I'd say there's my first reaction at first would say the resurrection of Jesus, but all that would do is just make you not into Christianity, right? There could still be a God. In terms of if there is a God or not, the elements of how the world was put together, and I mentioned it a little bit ago. I think there's a vast amount of things in the world of how our world came about, and then there's also things that we don't know yet. And so in terms of what would make me not believe, I think I'd have to say a overwhelming evidence of our world coming together that would not come from what I would believe would be a creator. So, even in terms of if you just said, okay, well, the Earth is really this many years old and not that many years old, that doesn't really change my mind. I think that's very, very understandable, and I think we talked about that very briefly. I mentioned that we didn't talk about it. I mentioned it briefly. Like I don't think that it took. I don't believe in a young earth, and so that's not something that would convince me. But if people continue to pour into evidence and said, look at these things, and also we're able to point out that any sort of feeling within, or pardon me, any sort of attestation of growth that I feel that God has allowed me to be led to from Him, if we were able to say, no, that this is from this, and you kind of got your reasoning from here. And think about it, Landon, you live in this part of the South, so I think those things would start to, or would have to be proved. I do think, however, on both sides, I think it's important to think about that. I think that's a really good point, because if you can't, if you just say, nothing at all, well, I don't necessarily think we're being honest with ourselves, because we're beings that, unfortunately, are kind of derived sometimes on our amount of the way we're shifted of our thoughts and our feelings. And so if we just say nothing at all, I don't think we can be challenged. And I think it's important to be challenged, so you can do research, and you can either A, revoke your belief that you had in something, or B, you can actually strengthen it from where it was before.
Okay. All right. And then the next question, I'll put it up here on the screen from Joshi2601. Landon, why do you believe? What drives your faith?
Sure. Well, that's a very big question. I'm going to point it down to something that I know, I understand you guys won't agree with, but that's kind of the reason this is why we're here, right? I believe that the Bible is the Word of God, and when reading it, I think if you did not believe in any divine parts of Scripture in and of itself and just read the Bible, it's really really a remarkable piece of literature. The way that things ebb and flow, and the way things are kind of put and constructed. But I believe whenever I've seen evidences of what I believe is God developing me as a man, not making me into a perfect guy, but actually quite the opposite. The Bible shows that God loves me for all of my faults, and dude, I can't even count them. There's so many every single day, and so I think that's something I tell you. I do not, at this point in my life in Christianity, whenever I'm having a bad day, something bad happens to me, I don't go towards, well, God just might not be real. There's a time I did, but I don't go, well, you got to remember, Landon, if God created the universe and He created this, then He also must still be promising you good things will happen. Instead, mine comes from faith. And the apostles, the people that had experiences with Jesus, that faced immense trials and ultimately death, who had this hope, even though things were beating down on them, literally whips and cracks and everything else. And so whenever I read that, I'm able to see that we can, or pardon me, I can. I'll just speak for myself. The things that I go through on a daily basis, they're hard. We lose loved ones. There's financial struggles, doubts within myself. It happens all the time. But whenever I read that God created me, Psalm 139, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It just means that God miraculously created me, of all people, and chose to die for me, even though knowing everything I'd ever do. I know this is a long answer. I'm sorry. Knowing everything I'd ever do, every wrong thing I would do, every time that I would pray in my bed at night when I was 15 years old, God, I'll never do this again. I'll never sin in this way. I'll never try to lie to that person again. And Him knowing full well that I was going to do it 3 years from then, whether I knew it or not, and He still chose to create me, is just remarkable. So anyway, I know that's really long. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be super long-winded.
No. So we're talking about a deep subject. So sometimes the answers are going to be equally, if not more, deep. So the next question is from Ashley for Mike. If God knew exactly what it takes to convince you, who is to say that you get out of your head enough to understand, and can you say for a fact that you would actually accept Him at that point? And Mike, you're muted.
Blooper reel. So yeah, I would say that that God knows exactly how to get me out of my head, if in case that hypothetically is the case. So if I'm in my own head, or if there's some kind of barrier, so to speak, that God knows how to take that barrier down. And if it chooses not to, I don't know what to do. It knows my value in sufficient evidence. It's aware of what I determine to be real. It could meet those standards. It chooses not to, and it eitherwise, in any case, is not my problem. But it's a good question. I mean, it's a very good question. I just think that it goes with my original answer, is that it would know what to do specifically.
Okay, fair enough. And then next question again for Mike. Question for Mike. What are your thoughts on the contingency argument?
Oof, that's a good question. That has to have been from Mark. So the contingency issue is a little weird, and I hope I answered this right for you, but this assumes what's called sustaining contingency. So, how do we determine this is a sustaining thing versus a causal thing? So, for example, there could have been a God that created a universe that just happened to cease exist, perhaps spewing forth its essence to create the universe, and then just decides to not exist. And in which case we would be left with a universe that is still contingent, and where it would be contingent on a God, but that God no longer exists for us to be, there to determine that conclusion. So it's a really slippery slope, because when you get into the contingency issue, it's almost as if you're in this position of, regardless of whether it's infinite regression or whatever, it's just, you would have to be at some point assuming a sustaining contingency at that sole point. And I don't think that necessarily follows. I do think that the contingency and causality is definitely a huge thing to get your mind around. But there are so many situations that you could apply, like the God that creates us, that has contingency on the universe, but then just ceases to exist. And we're at a point where we're still not left with what is the God. You're still at this ontological gap with, okay, sure, this contingency necessitates a God, or however you want to word it. How do we get to Yahweh? How do we get to Odin? How do we get to Allah? There's still a huge ontological gap there. So I don't think it addresses anything. I think it just goes back to cosmological, philosophical questions.
Okay. Next one. This was for Mike, and then Landon, I'm going to get you one here. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. Mike, do you believe in any supernatural, such as Wicca, ghosts, demons?
Nope. And I'm so glad that question was asked. Josh, I have so much love for you right now. That is actually, like, if I was to spew anything to anybody, I'm kind of over theism. I'm kind of over, no offense to Landon or anybody's position, I care more about just supernatural claims, which is why I would love to have a debate about the minimal facts with Landon, because that is my bread and butter. Like, taking a thing that hasn't been explained and then showing why that necessitates supernaturalism is a rudimentary ignorance fallacy and personal incredulity fallacy. And so I don't believe in any of those, because they're just like Jesus' resurrection, just like my friend that told me that a ghost was in his basement, and just like anything else, there's no reason to believe that. But there would be more reason if we heard a noise in the basement. It would be more possible by definition for me to say maybe it was aliens, because we know life lives on a planet. We know that life has the ability to make technology. We can extrapolate that. We can take that to another planet. It would be more plausible to say, no matter how astronomically just unlikely it would be, it has more demonstrated possibility that the alien could have made the noise in the basement than a ghost, because we have nothing, and I mean nothing supernatural to examine. If we did, I would not have the position that I do. So I'm so glad that question was asked.
Okay, so just
by the way, I just want to mention one thing. For people that are like Wiccans or they believe that the whatever you call it, the Ouija board works, or holding a pendulum and having Satan answer yes or no, that is called the ideomotor effect. It has been a demonstrated phenomena since the 1800s and confirmed since then. So please just do research and have better standards of evidence, because Landon believing what he believes, I don't see how this has affected him as a person. I don't see how this has changed him in a negative way. But somebody that takes, say, because I don't know his position on homosexuality and things, and that might be a whole different topic. But when someone's like, I'm communicating with Satan and I'm doing this clearly thing that's involved with being evil or whatever it might be, given if it's like a literalist Satanist, there's more of a reason for me to show why that's false, because people want to believe weird things for whatever reasons. They want to side with their feelings and personal incredulities. And I think those people are more of a harm and to influencers like on TikTok. However, on the theist side, I think they are more harmful to the aspect of legislation and our personal freedoms.
Okay.
So that's all. I just wanted to mention that.
So this is, I think this is more of a jab, Mike, and you'll understand it when I post, or when I put it up here.
Yeah. Yeah, Ashley knows my hatred for astrology, because we can literally look back at when the ancient Babylonians made this shit up, and we can literally look that they didn't understand that the earth tilts and that it wobbles like a top. And so everything that you think you're a Sagittarius, you think you're a Taurus, you're off. You're not even right. It doesn't line up like it used to, because when the sun transverses over those constellations, it's no longer accurate in what they thought it was. So
you're such an Aries, man.
That's another, Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm so glad you said that. But when I say that, that might be such a Taurus thing for me to say. So I don't know. So.
All right. And Landon, for you, and this is
but much love to Ashley.
Absolutely. Ashley, she's a, I love that I can always count on her to find a way to argue a point. And I mean that in a good way. Like, she's always challenging everything. And that's how you should be, whether you're a theist or an atheist. Oh God, who did the flat earth thing?
So that's actually where I came from debates, Josh. I actually started debates with flat earth. Not saying I was a proponent of flat earth, but I was a proponent of exposing why flat earth is not rational. So that's actually mainly my experience in debates.
Yep. So, and that kind of stuff
is not flat.
Yep. So Josh 2601, and then Mark, and Mark, I just want to say a shout out to Mark, because he's been in, since we've started doing our episodes, he's been in all of them so far, and been in the comment section. And Mark and Joshy, when we go to the after party, please come, because like those topics we're going to hit. I just want to make sure we stay on course here and respect Landon's time. So I'm going to ask this question to Landon. That way we kind of spread the wealth here on the questions.
Mike, people want to hear you answer questions, man, because you're so articulate. You're good at questions.
No, I appreciate it. The guy that asked the whole contingent necessary thing, I just want to mention that that this is the most important thing I could say tonight. I don't know, Mark. I have no idea. I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if it's contingent. And I think that's the honest answer. And I hope that that's the takeaway from tonight, is that I don't know is the reasonable answer.
All right. And then, so this will be the last question. We'll direct this towards Landon, and then we'll do our thank yous and our signing off and that stuff. And then just as a reminder, we will go to, in about 10 minutes, once we sign off here in about 10 minutes or so, we will go live with our after party, and that's where it's a little more free. And like I said, you will see me smoking a cigar and having drinks, and I encourage everybody to do that, because even Jesus drank wine.
I don't think Landon would disagree with that.
That's true.
All right, there we go.
True. I have a pipe that.
So yeah, something happened there.
Yeah, we glitched there for a second.
Yeah, it glitched for a moment. I have a pipe that my fiance's dad, because I told you guys he makes pipes, and so he made me one. Kind of it's a ring of honor, man. Look, you ask the guys if you can marry his daughter, you got to smoke with them too, you know. So I'd probably be with my pipe, but I'm physically inside of a church right now because I have the best internet. So
Well, Mike, he's opposite of Pastor John. Pastor John's internet at the church. He's on some
right.
shit.
Yeah.
My name's Pastor
Sure.
John.
By the way, Ashley asked a really good question. I think Landon would agree with. Do you believe verses can be taken out of context? And I would say yes. And I think atheists commit that problem more than most people.
That's interesting. Yeah. No. First off, yeah, absolutely. I was going to say I don't know if atheists do that more than Christians, man. Austin can attest to it. I don't mean to say that in a way where I'm defending it. I'm just saying that and sometimes they take it in context where it's not as bad as they think it is. Okay.
Well, I could tell you, and not to be a part of the debate, but I could tell you from an evangelical standpoint, the evangelical church in America they are the most guilty of taking verses and twisting and contorting them however it fits their narrative. 100%.
Yeah, I agree with
sure. It's the same on all sides. That's why I think that question's good because I think Christians do it, atheists do it, but it doesn't matter who does it. It matters what the truth is and how do we get to that conclusion.
Yep. So Landon, the last question for you, and this is, I kind of was just going through the comments, and nobody asked this directly, but I think it's again just watching the interaction. I think this is something that's worth asking. Let's say that, and it's even something I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this. So, atheists love to ask questions about the Old Testament. You know, what about slavery? What about the flood and genocide? Incest. Like it's very easy to go to that, and I still believe it's all true. We need to have that discussion. You know, my biggest one that I'm on right now is the Abraham and Isaac story. I think it's super fucked up. You know, but the typical, I would say 8 or 9 out of 10 responses I get to that is, well, Austin, you need to pick up your Bible and read it and realize that when Jesus came, he came to fulfill that law. Correct. Absolutely. The Bible does say that. The Bible also says that he did not come to abolish the law. And it actually says in there that no dot or no iota should be removed from it. And that I don't want to misquote the Bible. So, but essentially you could be you could deserve a potential eternal hell, for taking away from the law or not following the law. So my question is to you, how do you navigate that? Like, how do you decipher that? Because it literally says that, yes, I come to fulfill it, but I did not come to abolish it. So that actually means the slavery and, cutting off the hands, fingers, whatever for stealing, without going into all that other crazy shit. That means that's still in place. So what's your stance? What's your stance on that?
Gotcha. Good question. So you're already talking about, I'm going to read Matthew 5:17. If that's okay, through 19. Is that cool?
Yep. I think that's what I was referring to.
Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches them to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of God. So that's a really great question. It is the question you're asking is like, let's just use let's use the cutting off of the fingers or cutting off of the hand, for instance. Are you asking, was Jesus saying that we still need to fulfill these things? We need to be doing these things and that type of deal?
I guess in a simple form, yes. So just so I'm clear, on definition. So yes, he came to fulfill it, but not abolish. And the definition of abolish is to do away with, and eradicate. But that's not what, and if you're a Bible red ink reader, those are Christ's words. That wasn't somebody, just writing. So that's my question is, if that's true, that means that those laws should still be in the New Testament, should still be in effect and followed. So if somebody steal, I can't remember the exact, what it would be, if they steal or whatever, or your son, if one of my boys are unruly, I can take him down to the town square and beat the shit out of them,
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah. Again, good question. Well, I think first off, with if you look at the examples, let's just say whenever Jesus was physically there with Peter, and whenever Peter sinned against Jesus by denying him those 3 times, just as Jesus spoke, or any of the sins that the disciples had beforehand, I think that any of those laws that were there throughout all the things that we have recorded with Christ, wouldn't any of those be demonstrated throughout that time period as kind of really my first part of that. Second part of that is I need to exegete that and spend some time on it because I think that's a very good question. My only thing that I would tell you is, if that was the case, then whenever Christ was there, let's just say just during the 3 years that he did ministry, not even the other time, then with the remarkable amount of people that made mistakes and were sinning, and even let's just use the prostitute for instance that comes up and wipes her hair over Jesus's feet, that easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. Of course, it doesn't seem that Jesus reflects any of those original very harsh laws within any of his experiences. So that's where I'd go with it first. But again, second, Austin, I think you point out a very, very good point, and that's something that I need to study more closely.
And I regardless of the question, I know if that's what I'm learning to love about you is if you don't know the the exact answer to the question, you're not going to bullshit me and say, well, I have a conviction or the Lord told me, which is what it sounds cheesy and corny, like I'm mocking, and I'm not, because I grew up in church. That's usually what I got. Yeah. You just have to trust the book because it's the book. Sure. That's what I got all the time. So, no, I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, thank you for the question. Thank you also for being so kind when I say I'm not sure. I will always give it my best shot, but I need to do more study as always. I do think if you look at, this is the only thing that we need to be able to do to test if a false prophet is a false prophet. And I can answer this. How many false prophecies does it take to make a false prophet? One. And so, yeah, so people are like, man, I tell you what, the Lord told me that the earth's going to end, 1 year ago, and 1 year passes. I got it wrong. It's actually, that's you doing that wrong one time is all I need to know. And so whenever people go to that, and you mentioned either you or Mike, I can't remember who it was, but one of you guys mentioned Pastor Greg Locke. I don't even like to call him pastor, but Greg Locke, you know what I mean? That guy's nuts. He's nuts. And it really, really, just like you guys do, whenever I see him, like he had this video, I don't follow him. Somehow he gets put into my curation, but this dude's got some truck and he's like, hold on a minute, man. And he like drives his truck down there, like, hold on. He gets out of the truck. Oh, hey man, let me pray for you. Dear Father. I don't even laugh at that. I have to turn it because it bothers me so much. The amount of folks that'll just go to listen, man. I got a feeling. So anyway, there's sometimes I feel like go ahead.
Well, I was just saying it's the same when an atheist just is like we did a live stream for a debate with my buddy Cease to Know on TikTok and Vlad, and someone in the comments was just like, all theists are retards, and it was like, dude, what the like. I do not want to be associated with that type of atheist. That embarrasses me as an atheist.
Well, I trust that you guys, because one of you guys said it the other day, that we should not ever generalize just based upon one person, one example. And I really appreciate you guys for not doing that. And I promise I don't do that with you guys. I really appreciate you don't do that with me.
Yep.
Even though my hair's not as cool as Greg.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. You are the example and the evidence I would use to show that the generalization is not warranted to make. So
thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
I mean, yeah,
there are, most people think it's funny that we're having this conversation right now. And I won't make this long, but just in the last 24 hours, I got bombarded with people in my inbox talking about how much I hate Christians and I hate God and I hate church. And I'm just this nasty atheist asshole, which is again where that name came from. It was like, you obviously haven't spent time talking to me, and you haven't even talked to other theists that have real conversations with me, or you wouldn't be saying that. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. So just like we should not lump all theists and Christians into one group, it would be really shitty and disrespectful and irresponsible of us atheists to do that to all theists. Now, we still disagree with you, but we don't hate you. And even Mr. Locke, and I don't call him a pastor, he's a joke, but even Mr. Locke, I don't hate that man. I think he's a clown, and I think he does more damage than he does good for humanity. Shit, even his own fucking family. But we can't do that. Both sides of the table. We sit at the table. We can't do that. And Ashley, no, I don't hate you. You know that I talk to you all the time. But all right, and then Landon, you froze, but like, that's a great picture. You drinking that water bottle.
Oh,
but you
man.
froze.
That was like 40 seconds ago.
He froze on it. He froze on a different. He froze on kind of like a. For me, but
oh man, I'm sorry, guys.
There we go. There, now you're live again. All right, so chat room. Thank you guys for your questions. You guys were fucking amazing tonight, and it was cool to see all that interaction. And it makes me happy just watching that and seeing you guys have your own dialogue there. Why these two awesome gentlemen interact. So last time that I'll say it, give us about 10 minutes or so to get everything set up. And I also, just being honest, I just need to smoke a damn cigarette, but we'll get everything set up, and we'll start the after party. Give us about 10 minutes or so. We'll get in there. And I like to give the kind of the warning. There will be cigars and drinks and everything. That way, that this is the professional one. The next one is no holds barred. So, but again, Landon, for 2 times this week, and tonight, you were awesome tonight, man. You kicked ass. But we appreciate you being on.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for everybody who watched. It's one thing to be a part of kind of discussion. It's another thing, to be respectful and to listen and to do things, especially with everything else that you could be spending your attention on a Friday night. So thanks so much for everybody who's here and asked questions.
Yep, 100%.
And for Mike as well. Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, and yeah, and thank you, Austin and Landon, for letting me be a guest on my own platform. I appreciate that.
And thank you to Mike, because I had every intention until it was about 24 hours ago of I was actually going to be the one debating with Landon, and I just wanted to make sure I was respectful of him and his time, because I knew he had been putting research into it, and I didn't think it was fair to him or myself with having 20,000 little rugrats running around here and not being professional and inefficient with our time and the debate. So a big thank you to Mike for stepping in kind of last minute for me and doing that. So and considering he had about a 24-hour notice to prepare, he did amazing as well. So thank you to both of you. And then again, everybody that watched tonight, tuned in, you tune in later. Our request or desires that you hit the like and smash all that shit. I want to be like all the YouTube hosts, like Mike talks about. Smash that like button.
Hey, this is your boy Silly Sam 63529, and guys, today I have an awesome Fortnite tip for you. I just need you guys to smash that like button. Sorry, all right.
Smash. But in all honesty, for all you guys, thank you, and hopefully you join us in the future, and we'll continue to kind of push the vision of this being more being more relationship and conversation driven than just getting at each other's jugulars about you're dumb, well you're dumb, well you're dumb because you're dumb. It's pointless. So we're gonna sign off, and again, thank you for joining us at the Atheist Roundtable, where everybody has a seat. And we can all cut it up and have fun. And again, Landon, Mike, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you. We out.
Let me tell you.